I think that is the reason why a lot of people, especially now from overseas, both from the coffee industry and outside the coffee industry, come to Japan and are really amazed by not just I guess, the quality of the coffee, but they're just amazed, like how can you, how is this sustainable? How you're just one person?
We have an announcement to make. Starting this June, Mappa Forward is bringing a new perspective to the Japanese coffee industry with Mappa Forward Japan. Every 2 weeks, we're highlighting a selected series from the Daily Coffee Pro by Mappa Forward, translated and available in Japanese on our YouTube channel. Follow along on our new Instagram account, Mappa Forward Japan, where we'll share industry commentary, episode clips, and market updates, all in Japanese. And if you're in the Japanese coffee industry, join our mailing list for updates and exclusive content, also in Japanese. All the details are at mappaforward.coffee/Japan, and we'd love you to share this information with your Japanese friends in the coffee industry. Check the show notes for details. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mappa Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 2 of what is already a fantastic series with Yozo from Kurasu. Yozo, we are talking about starting, growing and expanding a Japanese coffee brand, which is what you have done with Kurasu. In the last episode, we were talking about your journey as a coffee entrepreneur that started as a finance guy at Goldman Sachs. And you ended up going to Sydney through your journey and starting Kurasu there as a homewares brand, and it morphed into a coffee brand. The first exposure that I got to the Japanese coffee culture was with somebody who I admire a lot in coffee and who I haven't spoken to in a really long time. And that's Shoji Sasa.
Oh, yes, of course.
Shoji and I started our careers at around the same time in the same place. We had both worked in other places before that, but we both ended up at Campos, and we were both like really put through the ringer at Campos. And then another person, because there weren't very many people when I started in coffee that were Asian, let alone Japanese, right? It was this thing that consumers wouldn't buy coffee from someone who was of Asian, who was Asian, right? So people just wouldn't hire Asians as baristas. And so Shoji broke that mold, and Yama broke that mold. Right?
Yeah.
And I know you know both these guys. So at the time, this was my first exposure into this kind of mastery around coffee. And in this conversation, we're going to talk about the kind of Japanese coffee industry, because when you go to Artificer, which is the company that Shoji and Dan Yee own in Sydney, nobody could say Artificer except for Shoji when they launched it. None of us knew how to say it. There was the only name when Dan came on the podcast and told it. He's like, the funny thing was no one can say the name. But that was the only name that Shoji could say that was on the list. That's why they called it Artificer. But when you go there and you see the commitment, like Dan's clearly a really big fan of the Japanese coffee industry, but you can see the focus. And I said to Dan when he was on the podcast, will you ever open another Artificer? He's like, no, we're taking the Japanese approach. The Japanese, we want to be masters of what we do, and we want to do it really, really, really well. And he's like, that's Shoji's influence there. So talk to us about what the Japanese coffee market is and why it's so unique.
Yeah, that's such a, wow, I could say so many things about that. I'm just
Say
trying to
whatever
think of
you
where
want.
to start. But yeah, I feel like, it's interesting because on the flip side, the reason why I was sort of hesitant to get into coffee was because of my perception of coffee through the Japanese coffee culture, where it's usually, again, like you said, trying perfection, right? And it's very small scale.
Yep.
Maybe family owned, or it's maybe one owner that's doing the roasting, the brewing, the and of course all behind the scenes as well, right? As you know, there's so much back office involved in running a
No,
home
I have
coffee
no
shop.
idea what you mean. Like, isn't it just
Right,
buying a roasting machine and
right.
and some
So
bags and putting it in there?
yeah, so I as much as I had respected that, I didn't see myself, myself personally,
Yeah.
um, be running that kind of a coffee shop for myself. And it was really again the flip side where when I went to Sydney or when I saw Melbourne and then when I
Mm.
saw a little bit of the bigger scale, mid, having I never knew that coffee you can have a company
Oh,
as coffee because of course I know there's the UC there's the in Japan there's the
UCC.
UCCs
Yeah.
and there's a big conglomerates and the corporations. I knew that, but it's either in Japan it's either that or just a very very small scale independent coffee shop,
Right.
right? So um that is I think that is the reason why a lot of people, especially now from overseas, both from the coffee industry and outside the coffee industry, come to Japan and are really amazed by not just I guess, the quality of the coffee, but they're just amazed, like how can you, how is this sustainable? How you're just one person in
For
this
good
shop,
reason,
and
though.
maybe
Right?
you're doing like 30, maybe 30, 40 cups of coffee at most. And how are you? This is amazing. And then they look, the baristas or the owner is just doing something that they love to do, and just doing it. They have a daily routine and just do it and perfect it, and
Mm.
that could go on for until they retire, right? Or until a lot of times in Japan, you maybe you see these videos on like TikTok or Instagram, but these small business owners do it until the day they die, right? So you have these like 90-year-old
That's
barbers or
wild.
90-year-old, you know, like Chinese restaurant owner, or like just ramen shop owner, like just random people, like just very old age people just doing it, and it's not that they have to do it, right? Or it's not because they do it for the money or anything. They're
Mm.
that age, they can retire,
Mm.
but it's just something that they're passionate about, just something that they love, and it's just something um that I, on the flip side, that's sort of all that might
All
be
they
something
know.
that all they know, right? They
Mm.
don't know what to do. They don't know what else to do because it's just part of their routine and it's just part of their lifestyle, right? So coffee is definitely part of that. Coffee shops here in Japan, I feel that are part of that culture. Filter coffee
Hmm.
has always been synonymous with just coffee shops, coffee brewing in general.
Hmm.
Espresso has never been a thing here in Japan up until these past, actually, I would say we opened Cross in 2016. I knew of maybe only like there were probably more, but for myself personally, I knew of maybe like two or three other shops that had a decent, espresso machine, right? A decent
Right.
that would be able to pull a decent shot of
Hmm.
espresso and lattes. Now there's like probably hundreds, and
Yeah.
that has shifted because of people coming in from overseas and wanting that cup of latte or their their
Similar to
their
what's happened
morning,
here in the Middle East.
yeah, their morning routine. But drip coffee was always how coffee was served in Japan, and because it was drip coffee, I feel like, and then again because of I guess the mindset of Japanese um people in general, there's always been that aspect of brewing the right cup,
Okay.
right? Using the right coffee, because drip coffee it's really easy to um uh it's not as compared to espresso, you get more of the, I guess, the terroir of the coffee.
The
That's where
nuance.
the specialty coffee movement started,
Hmm.
right? In the late 90s, and Um, but Japan has always sort of been doing that,
Hmm.
and the reason the reason why it was more darker roast in Japan for quite a long time is because the coffees that we were able to get was always like very old crop, or like we were Japan never was able to
Ah,
get quality coffee in post war. Um, and when our predecessors tried to do drip coffee, then there's a lot they can
you're
only really
tasting.
get like the
Yeah.
negative aspects of the coffee. So that's
Yeah.
sort of where it became darker roast, and that's where sort of people started trying to perfect the roast styles and trying to perfect the pour overs and the siphons and all these different stuffs happened. And it's never been about machinery, I guess, in Japan.
Mhm.
It's very, you know, we really enjoy very artisan. We very enjoy like just doing with your hands, and
The craft.
so yeah, no measurements in terms of scales or anything. It's just now,
Still?
of course, that has
Okay.
changed, of course, because of specialty coffee, because of
Hmm.
actually influence from outside of Japan. But it's always about you know that one sort of master. And it's funny because we call actually the I guess the owner behind the
Hmm.
bar, the coffee shop owner, we the name synonymous to the owner is master in Japan.
Really?
We say masta,
Master.
yeah, because they're the master of the shop, right? They control, you know,
Wow.
they're the
Their
wizards of,
domain.
yeah, exactly. So it's funny because in the coffee shop setting in Japan, especially the older style, it's very quiet. There's not a lot of conversation because because the master is working their craft, right? We don't want to disturb them.
Sort of like
And
alchemy.
we just, yeah, and we just sort of enjoy their craft. Um, so yeah, like I've touched on a lot of different things, but again, I would come back to the reason why people from outside of Japan, especially I guess from the
Mm.
West, are just and in Asia now, Southeast Asia, where coffee is booming, are
Yeah.
so fascinated about like how coffee is done in Japan is because it's just I guess just very the people being very meticulous, people being very precise, people um it's never a rush, right? It's always about, you know, that one cup of coffee at a time, brewing that to perfection and providing that. So that sort of, I guess, style of coffee is very different to like the more
Yeah.
volume, okay, grinder, espresso, pulling shots, boom, 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 boom. Hey, how you going? That type of
Right.
stuff. It's very nuanced. It's very calm. It's very quiet.
Ritualistic.
Yes. So I think that's and it's always sort of been like that. And again, because of specialty coffee, the styles of the designs of the shops, or um, maybe the style of, again, using like scales or more lighter roasts, or
Hmm.
the style of coffee has changed, but that ritual hasn't really. That ritual has sort of kept its place here in Japan, and um, I really feel that a lot of people are very, yeah, I do feel a lot of people are enamored by that, and
Yeah.
want to try to do that, want to try to take away that part of, the culture, coffee culture here back to wherever, their country is. So we see a lot of that style, right? In different parts of the world now. And even now, like even now, one of the trends is omakase, I think,
Yes.
right? Yeah, and that is again a very Japanese
Hmm.
thing as well.
Explain for
Um,
people who don't know what omakase is.
sure. So it's omakase literally means what does it mean? What's the direct translation in English? Omakase. Um, uh, the direct translation is off, but it basically means whatever. Uh, I'll leave it to whatever.
Chef's choice.
Yeah, chefs. Exactly. There you go. So there's no menu. Usually there's no menu, and just the chef provides. And then it's very it's more known for like maybe sushi. So sushi omakase. So the chef would just prepare whatever he feels that is the right ingredient for that day and prepare that. But in coffee, there's so Hide who's a friend of mine. So Hide Isaki is a former world barista champion. It's very well known, I think. And he started. He was, I guess, one of the person that started the Omakase movement, along with Miki Suzuki, which again is a barista champion, Japanese barista champion, and they with the intention and their experience of barista competitions and signature beverages, they created a similar omakase style where they get to choose the coffee, they get to choose what style, different signature beverages. So it's a course, and it's very very there's a lot of intention behind it. And yeah, I visited their place, but it's very well thought out, and it's experience, right? And again, that style might not work in a lot of different places, but again, it's something that's very Japanese. That's very people associate Japan with that style, right?
Somewhere it did work really, really well is there's a brand in Mexico, in Tijuana, Mexico.
Wow.
During the pandemic, so the brand is Baristas Bravos. And Baristas Bravos also owns another brand. And it's called Dos Cortes. And Dos Cortes was more of a commercial coffee franchise. They had, like, at the time, I think 8 or 9 branches around Tijuana. And they were beautiful. People loved them because the brand was owned by architects who had a deep, 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 deep passion for coffee. So what they decided to do, they were a client of mine at the time, and they had this space and the pandemic was coming, and they're like, well, we're going to open another one, but we want to do something different. And I said to them, I had floated this idea of the omakase approach. Nobody in Mexico had done it before. And these guys are so committed to excellence, and their team was so committed to learning how to do this. It took off.
Wow. Amazing.
And I think it took off for a number of reasons. One was the commitment to design and to excellence and to this idea of constantly learning from the owners as well as the staff. And it was a team effort between all of them to want to use this as a way that they could take their customers on a journey and an experience, while they themselves were also going on a journey and an experience to learn more about what can we get access to, how do we go to the farms and pick very special experiences, how do we pair these things with food. And they happened to be next to a very exclusive wine shop in Tijuana. And so there was this kind of environment that was already being cultivated around them, which was very different from the classical kind of Mexican approach to food and wine. So what they did was really revolutionary, and it drew all of its inspiration from Japan, all of it. Yeah. And it was, it was something I was very proud to work on with them in the tiny role that I played in just encouraging them and pointing them in the right direction. But when Baristas Bravos did what Baristas Bravos did in the middle of a pandemic, this, like we were saying in the last episode, how timing is so important. Well, you weren't allowed to have too many people in a room at the same time. Sure. So this omakase approach to this, had they have started it any sooner, it may not have worked.
Yeah.
But it was beautiful, and it continues to this day. So The thing I want to ask you about that with regards to Japan, like, and this
Sure.
omakase style to it, is
Sure.
what role does the consumer play in
Mm,
enabling that process? Like, is the Japanese coffee consumer primed for that kind of experience because
mm,
they already understand omakase and it's the next natural progression for
mhm,
the coffee industry to move in? Or do you think something else is at play there?
mhm. Yeah, that's such an interesting question. And I think for one, I think Japanese people, they we definitely are primed for that because
Hmm.
it's sort of always been part of our culture, and we understand it. And I mean, coffee is coffee omakase is it might be a new coffee omakase itself might be a new concept, but still we understand what omakase is, and still we
Mm,
appreciate, because not anyone can pull off an omakase, right?
yeah.
You need dedication. You need the passion, and you need the determination in order to sort of pull it off. And but at the same time, I think really, again, I keep on mentioning the people coming into Japan. I think a lot of the part of the Japanese, not just omakase, but Japanese coffee culture now, um, and this is in particular cities like Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka, maybe Fukuoka, the cities where a lot of these we get a
Tourism.
lot of tourism in. That has really shifted and pushed that kind of, um, evolved up, maybe I would say, the Japanese coffee culture in that way, because I feel like when you're traveling, you want an experience, yeah. You want something
Yeah.
different from what you
Except if you're Australian and you go to
ah,
America, you want American coffee. You're like an honorary
yeah,
Australian
yeah, yeah,
coffee bro, but you're
yeah,
not
yeah,
like when
yeah,
I was
yeah.
living in America and an Australian would
Mm,
walk into a cafe and they're like,
mm,
the coffee's shit. I wish they'd have.
yeah,
It's like, but you're going to
yeah.
a new culture to have to experience their coffee. No,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
all coffee
yeah.
tastes like coffee in Sydney or
Mhm,
Melbourne.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, coffee's that interesting thing where, yeah, I guess I understand people's sentiment of just you just need that sort of routine. You just need that same sort of cup of coffee that you love to start your day, right?
Right.
Um, but yeah, so in a lot of different aspects, like Japanese coffee culture, I'm seeing through these past 10 years has changed. And I've mentioned espresso. I mean,
Mm.
like no one had espresso machines anywhere. Now, like, they're everywhere. Or having that, like, omakase style, I think. I don't know the exact numbers, but I would imagine a lot of the people that reserve that are people from overseas,
Mm.
right?
Okay.
And coffee shops, and a lot of the more well-known brands, especially maybe in Tokyo.
Hmm.
A lot of people, when you go there, a lot of people there will be people from overseas,
Wow,
right?
that's so
So
interesting, right?
yeah, yeah, that is. And it's an interesting, that's one of the topics that has been discussed a lot here in Japan. That um a bit of the gap discrepancy of, because the yen is so weak now,
Mm.
right? And people come in, and the prices of coffee, prices of a very good cup of coffee, or a very high quality, a geisha, for example.
Hmm.
It's relatively speaking, it's quite, a lot of people say to me it's really cheap, right? That they find it
Oh,
really
from
cheap
outside.
from
Okay.
outside
Because
perspective,
of the
right?
currency
Because of the
situation.
currency.
Right.
Uh-huh. So, but at the same time, when from a local's perspective, as much as, like I said, people understand, if the pricing is a little bit higher, they understand that. But at the same time, a price is a price. Money is money,
Mm.
right? So, I think people will prefer not to pay, you know,
Right.
a lot,
These higher
a
prices.
lot, yeah, higher prices, a lot more what from what they expect. So that's just with coffee. That's with other, F&Bs or other sort of retail, that's happening here in Japan.
Mm,
Um, the coffee shops, I feel like a lot of them, especially in those cities, they've been pushing the prices up a little bit.
right. Right.
And it's a really balance between, and for us as well, not alienating our local customers,
Mm.
um, and striking that right balance. So, yeah.
Your economics mind must
Mm.
love thinking about these things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I I feel like yeah, that definitely we as Japan, the coffee industry as a whole, and some things sort of definitely you've been advocating, you've been pushing, and you've been educating so many people, I feel, and in the industry. But yeah, I feel like Japan, we have it's okay to have that conversation. We don't really like talking business. We don't really
Really?
like talking money. No, no.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, we never talk about. I feel like when I talk with my friends in the industry outside of Japan,
They're open to it.
yeah, they're open to it. And I think it's more about, learning from each other
Yeah.
and sharing what's working, what's not working. Um, and we both gain value from it. But in
Hmm.
Japan, I feel like it's really a like money is very
Right.
taboo topic in Japan, or boasting about your business, how well your business is going, or something like that
Right.
is very
It's not humble.
frowned upon. No, it's not. No, it's
Right.
not. So, um, but yeah, I feel like there should be a bit more conversation about that, and we try to be open and transparent as much as possible how our business model is
Hmm.
to the people here in the industry. Um, but yeah, that's sort of. I don't know. I don't know how a lot of the copy roasters
Are
are
surviving?
doing. Are not. They are surviving for sure.
Huh?
Um, yeah, but yeah, like you said, yeah, there are some that I'm like, how are they doing it? So that's
Yeah.
even for me being in the Japanese coffee industry for. So I imagine for someone from outside perspective, they're like, wow, how's this possible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I before we move on to the next episode, I have
Hmm,
another economics focused question, but not financial economics,
sure.
labor economics. Because we were talking about, as you mentioned, this is related to what you were just talking about. Um, you had mentioned that there are a lot of people that come from outside that influence the Japanese coffee culture. And I don't mean necessarily the drinking culture, but I mean the business culture and the way that the business owner is looking to meet a need from this, let's say, the tourists that come in. And that seems to have shifted the market over the last 10 years.
Mm.
Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I feel like Japan. Another thing that Japan, in my perspective, does well is we are very good at taking things
Mhm.
from and looking at things from maybe other countries or cultures,
Well,
and really
thank you.
trying to
Go on,
make
go
it
ahead.
our own. Yeah.
Well, the
um,
thing is, I want to lead into the second half of
okay.
my question
Okay.
before you
Okay.
finish that.
Yeah.
Because around the time Kurasu was in Sydney, we saw
Mm,
a real shift in the labour force in the Australian
mm.
barista market.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see where I'm going here?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
saw so many coffee shops start hiring Japanese and Korean
Yeah.
baristas.
Yeah.
And while Shoji-san and Yama-san were amongst the first in the coffee industry, there was a huge boom in people coming from Japan and becoming baristas. And I'm sure that shoji had a big influence in that. But what I'm wondering from an economic perspective, did a lot of that talent and a lot of the ideas that were cultivated, because they definitely had an impact on the Sydney coffee scene and the Melbourne coffee scene, right? So they brought a lot of that mastery and a lot of that focus and a lot of that injected that into the Australian coffee scene. Did they take it back and to Japan and influence the economics? And economics is not just about money, folks. Economics is about a lot of things. So did they influence the industry and the economics going the other way?
Yeah, that's a great question. Last time I went to Melbourne, like at Patricia's,
Wild.
every single barista was Korean. I was like, what the heck? Where am I? And Market Lane as well. Like I'm like, they're all Korean. Oh my goodness.
It's kind of wild how it switched, because in the beginning of my career, I remember we had this amazing barista. My first job was in a place called Mr. Espresso. God bless Mr. Espresso. And we had a delivery driver, and he was Chinese. And he was an incredible barista. And he would come in and he'd say, Miss Lee, please, can I just jump on the machine? And I'm like, yeah, Tony, like, I want you to make me a coffee. And I was just on the register at that point. But if he was on the machine, nobody would buy coffee. And I'm like, what's going on here? Why is this the case? And that's only 20 years ago, right? 10 years ago, we saw this shift happening in the coffee industry where now people won't buy coffee from a white person. It's less likely, right? Like you look at Stitch Coffee, it's hard to pick. I mean, Noir is an honorary Japanese person now, right? Like, because everything about what he does, everything about Stitch is so Japanese. It's fantastic.
So funny.
So anyway, go on.
No. I was going to say, so like the first point I was going to make is like, I think Japanese and people are really good at taking different things from different cultures. And, when you look at the industry, I think automobiles or electronics or those kind of things, I think a lot of people know the history behind that, right?
Yeah.
And for food, for like ramen, for example, those are Chinese noodles, but we sort of made it our own. Now everyone knows ramen.
Right.
as what it is, or like curry, or we have like Japanese curry or whatever that may be. So coffee, I think we definitely had a lot of influence, the third wave movement, right? From West Coast in the US, direct trade, specialty coffee, light roast, pour. This could be a whole nother episode of Cario. Right. It's funny because James Hoffman just released a video, I think last night, about Cario V60, how Starbucks was one of the reasons why the V60 became so popular, which was a very interesting sort of video. But V60 was actually not as popular in the States until Intelligentsia started using it.
Yeah. I was living in California at the time.
Yeah. So no one really cared about the V60 up until then. But, they saw Intelligentsia, and now it sort of came sort of full circle, and everyone started using Japanese coffee equipment in Japan, which is quite funny. But I feel like we take that, and then we sort of try to sort of perfect it, right? Whereas one could argue that sort of movement that started in the States has sort of fizzled. The main players that sort of started it are not what it sort of used to be.
We can't do it in quick service. Like that's the part that they seem to be missing, is like it works in Japan because, as I'm learning from this conversation with you, because there's a ritualistic element to the experience around a V60. Same thing here, right? People order V60s over ordering pretty much everything else. And that's because it's a ritualistic experience and they have the time, they understand that perspective. In America, it was never going to work.
Sure.
It was never going to work because most people are not prepared to wait the time that's necessary to prepare the beverage with the respect that it deserves.
Yeah, agreed. And we have a lot of influence from Scandinavia. I think maybe Scandinavia, Co- um, Copenhagen and Norway,
Right.
and Oslo, and those places might be a little bit more closer to Japan.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we have a lot of influence from Tim Wonderbowl and sort of the Nordic light roast and those kind of things we've taken in as well. So we've blended a lot of things that have happened and sort of tried to make it our own. And that's sort of how it evolved. And to your point about baristas going to Australia in particular, Australia has been such a really big place for working holiday for a lot of Japanese and Koreans. Yeah. And a lot of people want to have that experience of working overseas and being able to learn English and that I think they have the perception that Australia is especially now a lot more stable compared to somewhere like the States. So a lot of people do go to Australia and I think initially it wasn't that intention that they started working at a coffee shop to become a barista.
Right.
It was sort of like more of a necessity. They try to find a job, and coffee shop's the only place. There's coffee shops everywhere, and like they're always hiring, right? So slowly, gradually, I think more of the Japanese and Korean Asian population working holiday people started working in shops, and now people. I know a lot of people that want to go to Australia to work
in coffee.
And I think Australia and Japan are very different, coffee cultures, right? And there's its pros and cons, and we have different strengths. And I think for me, as someone that has a coffee company here, and we hire baristas, it's great. It's a great sort of I guess exchange of knowledge and expertise. People to have that experience working in a very high volume base, a lot of communication happening, you have to remember faces, you have to know what people want, you have extra hot, double shot and all this like crazy orders. That doesn't happen here. Right, but having
clearly worked in coffee in Australia,
having to work in that sort of pressured environment, coming back here, and it's a much more slower pace. But I feel like having that experience, and again, you can come back to Japan and sort of have that foundation and be a bit more intentional about it, be more focused about it, right? Of what you learn. It's not just about like doing it, just being exhausted every day and like just pushing out 500 cups and like not really being able to reflect. Whereas here, it's you can do more of that. So I feel like a lot of my baristas who have worked in Melbourne and Sydney as well, they come back and I feel like they're really they feel that they gained a lot from having experienced both coffee cultures. So that exchange, and then again, like you said, from the coffee shops in Melbourne and Sydney, from their perspective, they're able to hire and sort of have again, this is very generalizing and might be stereotypical, but more disciplined, very focused and very dedicated, passionate baristas coming in from Japan or Korea or other sort of Asian countries, and being able to sort of have them in the bar. So I think that exchange that's really happening right now in Japan and in Australia is a great thing, and I feel like the Australian government is pushing that as well.
Yeah, it's weird, especially with all the weird kind of laws that are happening around visas and stuff for hospitality workers.
Yeah.
To your point, before we wrap up, because again, we're almost at 40 minutes, The only reason I harp on the 40 minutes thing, folks, is because we release a lot of content and we want you to get through all the content. So when it goes for 40 minutes, you're going to probably take 2 days to listen to this episode. Anyway, what I wanted to finish on was that most of my friends who own cafes and roasteries in Sydney and Melbourne now look to hire people from Japan and Korea because of the discipline that you're talking about. They tend to be more aiming to do well at their job, and they have a humility about them culturally and a hospitality about them in the way that they approach the customer, in the way that they approach the product, all of that. So I definitely have heard what you have said being echoed through people that work and own businesses there. Yeah. So we're going to wrap up this episode because we could clearly talk about this for another 3 episodes, but we're going to talk about building a solid brand before expanding. I'm really excited about this conversation. Join us for the next one. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. This episode is part of a 5-part series produced by Mapper Forward. Check the full playlist and guest details in the show notes, as well as how you can support our work in the coffee industry. Become a premium YouTube subscriber, explore our Patreon and any brands we've partnered with to bring you this podcast. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really does help us grow our audience.